Alright, we're back with for another episode of Real Ranks, this time for the month of July. Had a pretty bad month of movie watching, both not of quantity and quality. Like I didn't watch many movies this month, and I also didn't watch many great ones either, which is unfortunate. But it's one of those things that happens every now and then. But at least it means we'll be through it pretty quickly, and it wasn't all bad. There was definitely some good stuff. Um, so the first thing I watched in the month is the like Ty West Mia Goth trilogy. I guess I don't know. Is it called the X trilogy? Is that actually the name? I'm not sure. But I think that's it. But yeah, I mean it's X, Pearl, and Maxine. I hadn't seen them before. I was basically waiting for Maxine to release to watch them all. And so watching them, and I was pretty disappointed. I mean, they're obviously very hyped movies, and I can't say I really understand the hype at all. I think the biggest problem the movies have is that they're obviously very inspired by, I mean, they're all genre pastiches of the past, and I don't think any of them are really done that well. Like, they kind of get the aesthetic, but then I think in terms of content, it's not actually able to compete with those movies. I mean, especially X and Maxine, being inspired by like 70s slashers and of course Texas Chainsaw Massacre in particular with X, and Maxine with Giallos, and it's just you're doing the things, but it's not dirty and grimy and just like mean enough to really be like one of those films. It's like a very polished, the edges are sanded off, modernized takes of those genres. And what made those genres great, what makes them great to this day, and what makes those movies work is that they're so unconcerned with with I mean they're unafraid to cross the lines, I guess is where I'm getting at. And these movies definitely are not. They're they're just not. You're just reminded of better movies, and that's a bit frustrating to me at least. Um, I also don't think Mia Goth is as amazing in them as people make her out to be, and I don't think that's her fault. I do love Mia Goth, but I think the writing is just not really there for her character, especially like in X and Maxine. That character just doesn't really have enough there. And then Pearl, kind of, but also not really. I don't think the movies are also pretty thematically like very thin. Um, and to be a bit more about talk a bit more about each of them individually. I think X is interesting. I think it takes forever to really get going and to do what you want from that kind of movie. I also think it's probably the most egregious when I say that these movies are not going far enough. Um, like this movie attempting to do what it does and then not even really being willing to show nudity, apart from like topless women, I guess. I think kind of is exactly what I was talking about before, where it's just like you're trying to do this thing, but it worked because they were willing to go to places that most movies were not, and you are also not willing to go there, and so it seems a bit pointless to me. Um, so yeah, I think X is kind of just like eh. I think it's actually the movie out of this. I feel like the most just whatever on. I don't. I probably have the least strong emotions about this, positive or negative. Um, and then I mean Pearl. I have the problem with where I think this is the movie that people often sort of talk about how great her character is, and I just don't really get that. I think she's completely overplayed, and she does not feel like a real character to me. They have the monologue towards the end. Of course, it's very iconic, and that monologue I think is really good. But I feel like it's trying to make up for everything that was missing before, and I don't think it really does that. I think it's like we're not getting anything for her, and then we're getting like everything in one big dump at the end. Um, and so as great as that scene is, I think everything before that is not great. Like I mean, it looks good with that way. It's kind of trying to mimic the Technicolor look, but also not like outstanding. Um, I mean, yeah, I think I would probably rewatch X for a rewatch Pearl, to be honest. And then Maxine, I think Maxine for a long time is the strongest of the three. Um, but then, like, the last third is, I mean, truly awful and probably the lowest low this franchise goes through the series of movies. Um, I don't know why they felt like that's the direction I want to go in. I was like this Psycho House being in there. I don't think it really does much. It's like a cute reference. It tries to do a little bit thematically with it, but I don't think it's really doing anything worthwhile with it. So I think Maxine is the best one. I think it looks the best. I think it's the most fun for a lot of the time. But then the last third is really, really not good. So yeah, all three of them, not for me. I know people love them. Good for the people that do. Um, but not quite for me, unfortunately. Um, which I followed up with another modern slasher, which is In a Violent Nature by Chris Nash. Um, this movie I really enjoyed. I I think I mean of course I've seen many complaints that it's like too slow or whatever, which is like kind of the point. I don't know. Like that's what makes it stand out to me. I think it's incredibly beautiful shot, beautifully shot. I really like the silence that it works with and the calmness for so much of it. Those shots of just the guy walking around. I understand some people are bored, but to me it really works. And I think it's a great premise, and like when it commits to this whole idea of being from the perspective of the flasher, from the slasher, I think it's pretty fantastic. Unfortunately, it then every now and then just decides to abandon that and cuts to the teenagers, which I think is a massive problem because first of all, like just commit to the idea that you have. It really feels like you had this idea that's great, and you were too scared that it might alienate a lot of audiences, which it will probably, but it is a unique take, and for people that like it, it will really work. But then you're just abandoning it to, I guess, do what a slasher is supposed to do, and it's kind of silly. Um, I think the other reason why it's a problem is because the dialogue is pretty bad and the acting is even worse. Like anytime people are talking, especially those, well, I guess they're not teenagers, they're like young adults. The quality of the movie really starts to drop because it's shot so well and it looks just fantastic. And then you hear the people talking, you realize, okay, no, this is an indie movie. This is the first movie from a director, and so that's definitely what holds it down, I think. But it doesn't mean I didn't like it a lot. Yeah, I think just the idea of it is so interesting, um, and really works for my taste specifically. Um, and the second movie is coming. I hope the second movie continues the trend of this very slow, calm, silent slasher film and actually commits to it instead of just going into the opposite direction and moving closer to other slashers and then inevitably just becoming another slasher franchise. Um, but we'll see. Uh, I mean, I will say it has some incredible kills. There's the kill with the yoga girl. I think people who've seen the movie know what I mean. Uh, Insane, like really good gore. So that's also just fun. Um, Actually, I don't think I put it even higher. I really do think it's so much fun, as long as there aren't young adults on your screen talking. um, then I watched Friday the 13th by Mark Snispel, the remake. Not that great. I mean, it's a modern remake or 2000s remake of a slasher, so it's kind of no, I think what to expect. It's the opening like 20 minutes or something are really great. After that, the characters are annoying, which I know is like the cliche or like what the genre does a lot of the times. But like these characters, I don't know, and like it's shot pretty, like it's pretty ugly, and not in a way that I think it benefits from that. I don't think the kills are super interesting. Except for one. There's like the girl in the water who gets a knife in the head. I guess that's what I'm gonna say about that. And hopefully you know what I'm talking about. That kill is pretty great. The rest, So it's just like a very underwhelming slash, I think. The last like 20 minutes, also just a weird decision for a Friday the 13th movie. I don't know. I don't have much to say, but certainly don't have good things to say. So, yeah, I don't know. Is it better or worse than the X trilogy? Worse, I think. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's worth watching once, maybe if you're curious, if you love the franchise. But there are a lot of Friday the 13th movies you would probably rewatch before you go to this one. So then I watched Tale of the Mummy by Russell Mulcahy. I think so you pronounce his name. Australian director. He did Highlander and some other stuff. And this movie is one of his lesser known, I would say. Watch this one because, Shelley Duvall unfortunately passed away, and I wanted to watch something with her in it, and I didn't want to go with the obvious, Shining or something, and I ended up going with this. And this is one of those movies that has super low ratings on Letterboxd, like really low ratings, and I understand sort of why. Another movie where like the last 20 minutes are pretty bad, which seems to be like a pattern, I guess. I don't know. Like the look of the mummy in those last 20 minutes is ridiculous, looks awful. But I think before that, it's actually pretty interesting. It's a completely different take on like the mummy story. Kind of infused with elements of like H.P. Lovecraft and Clive Barker, with this almost, I would say, like police procedural, like horror police procedural, where people are just slowly going insane. People are being haunted by the mummy, but instead of like a physical mummy, it's basically these like floating rags that kill people, that take different forms. I think it's a very interesting take. I love seeing people go slowly insane. But then, yeah, it loses itself at the end. But I do think until like the last 20 minutes, it's like pretty solid. Like I would say a pretty underrated movie, and one that I would recommend to people who are, interested in like love, like cosmic horror, basically. Cosmic horror, The Mummy is what you're getting. Um, yeah. Uh, then I mean the clear highlight of the month for me should be obvious. It's Touch of Evil. Got to see it in 35 millimeters in the cinema, and I mean it's a movie that's still relevant today. Um, Probably always will be. These movies about like corrupt police, it's always a thing, seemingly. Um, but I mean, the real standout here is obviously like the cinematography is absolutely insane. Like Orson Welles just knew how to make things look interesting, look dynamic, look. I mean, the way this works with shadows and with distorting the image just through, again, shadows, but also just shapes. Um, the kind of camera movements he does here, how long some of the takes are, it is like ridiculous work. I mean, I know seeing this in 35 millimeters was incredible, and yeah, like Orson Welles, one of those people that I think people sometimes almost dismiss because he's like the guy, like, oh yeah, he's a great filmmaker, he's like homework, right? I think people sometimes have this idea of like homework cinema, that's like, oh, you need to watch because it's important, but it's not actually entertaining. And Orson Welles is definitely one of those people. But like, no, these movies are incredible for a reason. Like, they're entertaining. Again, this movie looks like absolutely insane. Some of the most gorgeous, like black and white cinematography you can see. Um, he's also a great actor in it, Uh, yeah, just I mean, it's a classic for a very good reason. It's fantastic. Um, then I watched In the Shadows, also 35 millimeter, by Thomas Aslan. It's a German film set in Berlin, like a heist film. Um, it's alright, like it's good, but it basically really strips back the heist genre or the gangster film, I guess. But it strips it so far back that there's not much left, you know. I don't think there are really much of any stakes. The tension, I don't think, is entirely there. I can't say I really care about many of the characters, and so you're just kind of sitting there, letting it unfold. Um, so it's pretty mediocre in that sense, I think, but I do think it does depict the city of Berlin in a really interesting way. I grew up in Berlin, and it's I like the way he shoots the city here. I like the way this movie uses transitional spaces and how this movie's always in movement. So it has a lot of things going for it. I think it's a movie that's more interesting to look at, not necessarily from an academic standpoint, but just looking at it, what it does, like how it uses the city of Berlin to tell its story. Which I know is a bit of a cliche, like the city is a character. But I do think, in a way, this movie is a heist movie very specific to Berlin, and that is very interesting to me. I wish it was more engaging, but I don't think it is entirely, unfortunately. I still want to see Scorched Earth, which is a sequel that came out this year. When I watched the movie originally because of the release of this new one, but then I kind of just didn't get around to seeing it yet. So I'm curious about that one. I definitely didn't hate it. And again, I think it has interesting things going for it, but I don't think the central story is just that engaging for what it needs to be like a great heist thriller. And then I followed it up with Deadpool and Wolverine. What is there to say about this movie? I don't think it's as bad as people make it out to be. I certainly don't think it's as good as people make it out to be. It's an unbelievably ugly film which at this point I guess is to expected from the MCU or really Disney movies at large, which is unfortunate because they have the money to make them look good, but they just kind of don't. And I think Deadpool and Wolverine is even largely shot on location, which I don't know how you make it look this bad, but I guess Sean Levy is the guy to do it. Um, you know, I mean, it's incredibly reliant on references, obviously, on meta humor. As a story, it like barely holds together. Um, but yeah, it's kind of fun. Like, I do think it is kind of fun. I do think it has some decent action. I do like seeing some of those characters, I guess, but it's just like, yeah, I don't know. It's better than what I expected, I guess. And I did have some fun watching it. I don't think I'll ever watch it again. I don't think I'll ever think about it again. Yeah, that's kind of it. And then lastly, what I'm gonna throw in here is the newest season of The Boys, which I finished at the very end of the month. I started watching it as it was releasing weekly, but then I stopped after like episode 4 or 5 because I was just pretty underwhelmed by the new season. I do love this show, but I do think the new season is by far the weakest. I really hope they get it together with the final season, but this one felt just so all over the place and unfocused. I do think it's had good moments, especially in the second half. I do think it sort of catches itself and comes around a bit, but not the standard that I would expect from the show. And a bit disappointed in this season. I hope the next one is better. I hope. I mean, they're doing the like spin-off and stuff now. I don't know if we really need them, but I hope if they do make some of them, they are also once again better than what this was. Because I enjoyed the show, but I don't think this was it. I mean, it was better than Deadpool and Wolverine. And again, like it is the show, and there's a base level of the show where I just enjoyed, and I do think it is interesting, but this was just worse than expected from the show by now because it has set a pretty high standard for itself. And yeah, that's it for the month. Again, a bit of a bad month for me. But hey, I got to see Touch of Evil in 35mm, so how much can I really complain? And yeah, I'll be back next month, hopefully with more movies, hopefully with better movies, and I'll see you then.